I have run that same stretch of county road 400 times. 14 miles from the Caldwell West Ambulance Bay to the Pinehurst VA transfer station, back again through the overpass and the rail yard, back to the ER doors. In 6 years I have carried men who were already gone and men who came back loud and grateful and men who never said a word to me ever again. You learn, after a while, not to make it personal. You do the job. You deliver what you have. You go back for the next one. The call came in on a cold Tuesday in February. 62-year-old male, altered consciousness, suspected ischemic event, found down in the parking lot of the Pinehurst VA outpatient clinic by a nurse tech who stepped outside for air. My partner that night was a former Navy corpsman named Gil Torres, 6 years out of the service and still the steadiest set of hands I have worked beside. We ran it like any other: vitals, for access, monitor leads, oxygen, move. The patient was a big man, broad across the shoulders, gray at the temples. He wore a field jacket with no unit patches, just a small American flag above the left breast pocket. No medical alert bracelet. His wallet identified him as a veteran with a VA card. His hands were calloused and still. I remember noting the jacket. I remember thinking he looked like the kind of man who had done something in his life that he would never quite talk about. That was all I had on him when we came through the ER doors at Caldwell West at 9:47 in the evening. The receiving nurse met us at the bay threshold. She was young, late 20s, maybe early 30s, brown hair pulled back, teal scrubs with a hospital badge on a lanyard over her stethoscope. Calm, quick, the kind of calm that is not indifference but the opposite of it. She swept the vitals from Gil's verbal handoff and was already moving beside the gurney while I was still reading the EKG strip. She reached for the jacket to move it aside and get to his chest for a fresh set of leads. That is when she stopped. Not a stumble. Not confusion. She stopped the way a person stops when they have heard their own name called in a place they did not expect to hear it. Her hand was on the lapel of the field jacket, and she went completely still. I watched her. I thought, for a half-second, that something was wrong, that she had found a wound, or a piece of hardware from an old surgery, something that complicated the picture. But she was not looking at his chest. She was looking at the inside pocket of the jacket. It had fallen open when she moved the lapel, and through it I could see the edge of something laminated, a card or a folded paper, worn thin at the corners, the way something gets when it has been carried a very long time. She did not pull it out. She leaned just close enough to read it through the plastic sleeve. Her lips moved. She was reading something to herself. Then she straightened. She called out his blood pressure reading to the charge nurse and told the resident on duty what she needed: a CT order, a neurology page, a second 4-line at the AC. Her voice was level. Her hands were already working. But I had seen her face in that half-second of stillness, and I knew something had shifted in the room that had nothing to do with the stroke protocol. I found out what was in the pocket 14 minutes later, when she came to the supply station where I was restocking the bag. She did not lead with it. She asked how long he had been down before the tech found him. I gave her the estimate, 10, maybe 15 minutes, based on the last time anyone had seen him inside the clinic. She nodded. And then she said, quietly, like she was checking a fact from a list she had carried for a long time, his jacket. The inside pocket. There is a card in there. A laminated field note. I told her I had not looked at it. I wrote it, she said. I did not know what to say to that. She told me about the note the way combat veterans tell you things, not with drama, not all at once, but in order, because order is how you survive what you are describing. She had been a Marine Corps Force Reconnaissance Attached Trauma Medic. Call sign, Heron. The operation was a nighttime riverine extraction off a stretch of coastline that she did not name, and the name would not have meant anything to me anyway. The extraction team's boat took fire during egress. 4 Marines went down in the first minutes, not killed, but critically wounded, all of them needing attention at once with almost nothing to work with. She worked on that open water for 3 hours. No surgery suite. No overhead light except what the stars gave her and one handheld torch held by the boat's helm operator, who was keeping the vessel moving and could not let go. No proper equipment, what she had was what she had carried in, and some of it was already used up from a contact earlier in the week. The tourniquets were improvised from straps and gear. The chest seals were improvised from packaging. One man's airway. She managed manually the entire transit, her fingers in position, because the device she needed was not on the boat. She held pressure on a second man with her knee while she talked a third man through placing his own 4-line because both her hands were occupied. She kept talking to all 4 of them, not to comfort them, not in the soft way a person talks to someone dying, but in the steady, factual way a medic talks to keep a man's brain working, because a man who hears his own name and hears a calm voice answering is a man who keeps trying. The medevac pulled them at first light. She did not know, when they loaded those 4 men onto the helicopter, whether any of them would survive the flight. She had done everything she knew how to do and it had not felt like enough. You could hear that in the way she said it, not self-pity, not second-guessing, just the plain weight of the arithmetic. 4 men, 3 hours, 1 set of hands, and no way to know the final count. The boat crew took her back to the staging area. The debrief happened. The paperwork happened. And then the men were gone, routed to a surgical facility she was not cleared to follow them to, and she never got a name, not a single name confirmed, not a word back through the chain about who had made it and who had not. She had written the note on a field card. One of the 4 unconscious Marines had a vest pocket open. She had tucked it in before the helicopter took him. She did not know if he ever read it. She did not know, for years, if he was alive to read it. The note said, "You are going home, Marine. I will not forget your face. Heron." That was the card in his jacket. He had been carrying it for 9 years. I went back into the bay with her when the CT came back. The resident, a young woman named Dr. Paris, was walking through the imaging with the neurologist on call. The patient, his name was Calderon, and he was a retired gunnery sergeant who had done 4 combat tours and a 5th one nobody ever wrote up properly, was conscious by then, intermittently, responding to his name and to pain, which was good, which meant the window was still open. He had a left MCA territory stroke and they were going to move him within the hour. She stood at the rail of the bed and looked at him. Not at the monitor. Not at the chart. At him, at his face, the way you look at someone you have been trying to remember for a long time and are afraid you misremembered. He was looking at the ceiling. She said his rank and last name, quietly, the way you say a fact you have rehearsed until you are sure of it. His eyes moved to her. She said, 4 of you came off the water. I need to know they made it. His mouth worked for a moment. She waited. She did not rush him. She stood there at the rail of the bed in the middle of a working trauma bay, people moving around her, monitors going, and she waited as long as it took. He said, all 4. The room did not stop. Nobody else in that bay knew what had just passed between them. The resident was still reading the CT. The charge nurse was on the phone with Neuro ICU. But I knew, and Gil knew, because Gil had come back in to help with the transfer prep and had heard her say his name and rank, and I watched him go very still the way she had gone still at the gurney. Then the old gunnery sergeant looked at her for another long moment. His eyes were clear now, clearer than a man in his condition had any right to be, and he said 2 syllables, rough and certain, the way a man says the one word he has been meaning to say for 9 years. He said, Heron. She said, yes. That was all. Gil Torres is not a man who shows much. 6 years I have worked beside him, and I have seen him crack exactly twice, once when a pediatric call went badly and once at a funeral for a partner we both knew. He was standing in the doorway of the bay in his transport uniform, and when the gunnery sergeant said her call sign, Gil came to attention. Not a lean. Not a straightening. He came to full attention, shoulders back, chin level, hands at his sides, the way you do when the uniform demands it and nothing else will do. He held it for 5 full seconds. Then he stepped back into the corridor. I found out, when we were walking to the rig, that Gil had done 1 deployment as a corpsman with a Marine recon element, years before he came to EMS. He would not tell me the operation. He said he did not need to know her name to know what she had done on that boat, because he had done something like it himself once, with less, in worse conditions, for men who never knew his name either. He said the note was the thing. The note was what stayed with him. He said that when you are the one keeping men alive in the dark with your hands and your training and nothing else, you do not know if it counts. You do not know, until someone tells you, whether the work you did in the dark ever reached the light. And she had tucked that card into a wounded man's pocket 9 years ago, and that man had carried it home and carried it through 4 years of recovery and carried it in the inside pocket of his field jacket to a VA parking lot in February, and she had found it tonight because the work brought it back to her. She did not forget him, Gil said. And he did not forget her. That is the whole story. We ran 2 more calls that night. I did them the same way I do every call: vitals, for access, monitor leads, oxygen, move. But I was thinking about what it meant to carry something for 9 years. Not a grudge. Not a grief. Just the proof that someone had stayed with you in the dark when you could not stay with yourself, and you had never been able to tell them that it worked. I thought about the kind of person who writes a note on a field card and tucks it into a wounded man's pocket at first light on the water, not knowing if he will ever read it, not knowing if there is anyone left to read anything. And then goes back to the staging area and fills out the paperwork and does not hear a word, for 9 years, and gets up every morning and goes to work in a teal scrub set in a county ER and meets the next gurney at the bay threshold and does the job. That kind of person does not forget a face. I know that now. The gunnery sergeant went to neuro ICU at 11:15 that night. Before the transfer team moved him, she stood at the bed one more time. She did not make a speech. She adjusted his blanket. She said, quietly, that he should rest, that he had done enough. He closed his eyes with his hand flat on the outside of his jacket, over the pocket with the card in it. The transfer team rolled him out. She went back to the board. I watched her pick up the next chart. I watched her walk toward the next bay. And I thought about the old gunnery sergeant carrying that note through every hard year after the water, not knowing if the woman who wrote it was even still alive, not knowing if she would ever know that all 4 of them made it home. He thought she had forgotten him. She had not forgotten a single one.